Hey guys, Todd Anderson here with some Legacy action leading up to Grand Prix New Jersey. Today we're going to be playing Just Sky Stoneblade. Now, Stoneforge Mystic isn't a new concept in Legacy. It's been around for a while in a ton of different iterations. Uh, Began way back in the day as a blue-white control deck, featuring Swords of Plowshares, Force of Will, etc. And not a whole lot has changed. The decks that we're trying to fight has changed, so we've had to add a few tools to our arsenal in order to combat those decks. But let's go ahead and take a look at the deck before we get started in a daily event. As you can see, we do have a reasonable number of spot removal spells with 4 copies of Swords of Plowshares and 2 Lightning Bolts. And this is kind of a lean towards the fact that Blue-Red Delver has been popping up a lot lately thanks to Treasure Cruise. Treasure Cruise is one of the more gross cards in Legacy right now and kind of pushes the format in a weird direction, but I like the way this deck really tries to handle that. And basically, any sort of blue-red based deck right now can play some number of Power Blasts in the main deck, and it can bite you by not being able to kill anything out of a mono-white deck, a green-white deck, a zoo deck. There are a bunch of decks in the format that don't play Brainstorm, and Power Blast is going to be pretty bad against them. But at the same time, we do have access to Brainstorms to shuffle them away when they're dead, as well as Jace the Mind Sculptor. But for the most part, there is enough blue in the format so that Power Blast is main deckable in most blue-red strategies. Our dig spells, in order to make sure we hit all our land drops and we can find the important cards for the late game, we have 4 Brainstorm and 2 copies of Ponder. Ponder is the weaker one, but I still like having access to a couple more than just 4 Brainstorm as dig spells to make sure that we can actually cast things like Dig Through Time later in the game. Dig Through Time, is a little bit better than Treasure Cruise in this deck because Treasure Cruise kind of bottlenecks you in deck building to play things like Gitaxian Probe, 4 copies of Ponder, and just a ton of these really cheap or free cantrips. And our deck isn't really designed to take advantage of playing those kind of cards, so instead we're just using early disruption like Spell Pierce, Counterspell, Force of Will, Pyroblast to disrupt our opponent, as well as our cheap removal with Swords and Bolt, and our cheap cantrips with Ponder and Brainstorm to make sure that we get to delve enough so that we can cast Dig Through Time for 2, sometimes 3 mana. The rest of the creatures, the threats in the deck, we have 4 Stoneforge Mystic, 3 True Name Nemesis, and a Vendilion Click. The Stoneforge Mystics in the main deck can go get a Numazawa's Jite or a Batterskull, but out of the sideboard, we also have 1 copy of Sword of Feast and Famine, since there are some combo matchups where we just want to swap that out for Numazawa's Jite. We do have 1 copy of Snapcaster Mage. It's a little awkward in delve strategies because you don't want to eat your whole graveyard with the delve card, but you also want your spell to be cheaper in Legacy. But the value that you get out of Snapcaster Mage in matchups where you really need another removal spell, or you really just need another body to equip the Jite to, Snapcaster Mage is pretty good. But there are times where he does counteract with Dig Through Time, so we don't really want to play more than 1. We have 1 copy of Council Judgment to go along with the bolts and swords. This just gives us an out to things like an opposing Planeswalker or a random enchantment or something in the main deck. Since we have Dig Through Time, it's good to have 1 copy of a card like that to just get you out of any situation. Similarly to like Snapcaster Mage and Counterspell, these are just very situational cards that having access to Dig Through Time lets them them being in your deck makes it so that you have outs to things. And you can find them pretty easily for the most part. The mana base is pretty well set up for just like mostly blue-white. We have 4 Tundras, 3 Island, and a Plains, as well as a bunch of fetch lands that can get all of those things. We do have 7 ways to go get our Island, and we have 7 ways to get Island or Plains, and it's possible that we only want 6 ways to go get Plains. We should probably be playing a Scalding Tarn over an Arid Mesa, but I want to go get the Plains enough against Wasteland-based Delver decks that it's worth having the 7 ways to go get it, and all of our fetch lands do get all of our dual lands. We are playing 1 copy of Caracas as a nod to Sneak and Show and Brad Nelson's success with it last weekend in Columbus. But the smallest change in the mana base can alter how you draw like your spells every turn. Like being able to cast them is really important. So like changing your mana base in the slightest could alter how games play out based on that. The version that won had 3 islands, 2 plains, and a mountain. I don't think this kind of a deck really needs access to a basic mountain. Usually, you only have 4 red spells in your main deck, so like having that many red sources I think is a little egregious. But what it also does is that there will be a lot of draws where you won't be able to cast 2 spells in one turn because you've drawn so many basics. So we're getting away with almost the bare minimum. We could probably go 2 island, 1 plains, maybe even 1 island, 1 plains if we're feeling like pretty hard up on just being able to, like, we don't really need that many basics except against opposing decks with like Blood Moon or Wasteland. But I like having access to the 3-1 split in this particular strategy, mainly because we have Blood Moons of our own in the sideboard. Now, I think the original list played 2 plains excuse me, 2 plains in the main deck so that it could cast Blood Moon and Core Firewalker against the same decks. But I don't really know of decks where that's too important, so I opted to just go down to 1. But Blood Moon has been pretty strong in this archetype, being able to lock out opponents that are playing like Deathblade or Jund, Bug, decks that don't have any basic lands. You can usually kill off their Deathrite Shamans with Plow and Lightning Bolt, and sticking an early Blood Moon or just a Blood Moon when you have the board clear just ends the game. We do have, like I said, 1 copy of Sword of Feast and Famine, which is great to swap out for Umzao's Jite. 1 copy of Wear and Tear as a disenchant effect against strange, artifact or enchantment-based strategies. 2 copies of Pyroclasm against things like Elf Combo. 2 Core Firewalker, which are fantastic against Blue-Red Delver and Burn. 2 Containment Priest for any deck that's trying to cheat creatures into play, whether that means Ether Vial, Green Sun Zenith, Show and Tell, Reanimator, you name it. 1 Blue Elemental Blast as a nod to Burn, Sneak Attack, even the Blue-Red Delver decks having a lot of things like Power Blast to shut you down. 1 copy of Flusterstorm to come in against combo decks, or just very instant and sorcery-based decks. 1 Power Blast to add a third against the, Treasure Cruise decks, things like that, and then 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage against Elf Combo as well as graveyard-based strategies. There's not a whole lot to say about this deck as far as the deck tech is concerned. I've been very happy with how the deck plays out in a number of matchups. I think it's really powerful, and it's my current front runner for the Grand Prix this weekend, so let's see how we do in the event.